Well, I want to take you back to 1963. I had been a priest then for 7 years, and I was in a town called Sunderland, and what made Sunderland famous that particular time was September 1963 was the Beatles were visiting the Empire Theatre in Sunderland. Now, I was a self-appointed theatre chaplain. There were no such things, actually. There was a Catholic theatre guild, but there were no actual formal theatre chaplains. But a friend of mine appointed himself to be the theatre chaplain, and he visited the theatre every week to see if there were any Catholics there. Could he, as a priest, be of any use to these people? So I followed on from his example. I made myself a sort of informal theatre chaplain, and in those days you'd meet people like, people forgotten about now, Ruby Murray, Frankie Lane, he was somewhat famous at the time, Frankie Vaughan, Winifred Atwell, people who came and went to the theatre, and we'd meet them, and I hadn't met anybody particularly famous until September 1963, when these amazing people called the Beatles came to town. So people said to me, "Oh my God, you're going to meet the Beatles," and the teenagers were screaming, of course. You know, everybody was falling about, swooning at the Beatles at the time, and I picked that up, of course. I wasn't terribly interested myself, but I thought, okay, these are top guys at the moment, so I'll go see them. So I turned up at the theatre. I fought my way through bunches of teenagers who were screaming, not at me, but screaming at the Beatles, and I got inside the stage door. I was allowed inside the stage door, and I went up to the dressing room, where the four lads were, the famous lads were there, and I saw them for the first time with their big sort of bushy Beatles hairdos, of course, which were famous at the time. And I just knocked on the door, and they let me into the dressing room, and I said, I'm a theatre chaplain, do you mind if I talk to you? He said, no, not at all, no, come in, welcome, you know, great. So they seemed nice guys, and I didn't know where to begin, so I sat down in amongst the four of them, and I thought, one of them, actually, it was John Lennon, had his feet up on the table, and he had which to me was an astonishing thing at the time, he had a portable TV. It was 1963, I presume there were such things at the time. Between his feet, he had his feet up on the table, and he had this little TV between his feet. The rest were just hanging out, various chairs. So I sat down, and I was wearing my clerical attire at the time, and black trilby hat, Roman collar, black suit, as we did in those days. And I just said, hey fellas, I'm a Catholic priest, I do this every week, I come to the theatre, I meet people, and I said, well, I really want to know, are any of you, first of all, are any of you Catholics? And the first thing I remember Paul saying, Sir Paul, I beg your pardon, Paul at the time said, my mother was a Catholic, but the old lady's dead. I said, you're a man of deep sentiment, I can see that. So I remember we laughed about that, and I shouldn't have said it really, because I didn't know his story or his relationship with his mother or anything like that, but he sounded flippant. And the other guys were just shrugging, and I think it was George Harrison said, you know, they need you till you're about 10, you know, to get you. Then they've got you when you're about 10, they really got you then. There's no escape after that, you're a Catholic after that. And so I said, well, thanks for your input. I said, you know, I'm glad you know so much about it. So we talked a bit about being Catholics, and Lennon sounded as if he might be Catholic, but he didn't sort of express any interest in that at all. George Harrison could have been anything, but Ringo Starr, again, could have been a Catholic, but again, I think they mentioned that they had some sort of Catholic connections, which was what I was there for. I was there to just talk about this kind of thing. So from then on, it got a bit sort of, they took me on, really, in a very jocular kind of fashion. It was really very light-hearted. They were having a go at me. Here I am, a Catholic priest, and they have their opportunity to ask me to put me on the spot and so on. So at one point, I remember, it was George Harrison said to me, he said, what was it? He introduced the subject of, I'm trying to think now, you'll have to edit this bit, I'm trying to think what he started with. no, I'll cut to something else. Ringo, at one point, I'd been there about probably 15 minutes, and Ringo said, he said, Father, he said, would you like a drink? I said, that's the best thing I've heard in years. I said, that's wonderful. He says, I'll get you something, what would you like? I said, well, what about a brandy and soda? He said, yeah, no problem. So he went down 3 floors from the dressing room to where the bar was, and came back upstairs with a brandy and soda. So he said, I said, Ringo, I can't thank you enough. I said, this is wonderful, and so here's to your health and so on. And he said, Father, he says, when all this is over, do you think I'll get in up there? His Liverpool accent said, up there. I said, you will. I'm not sure about the other 3 guys, but Ringo, you'll guarantee a sitting, you'll be up there. So the other 3 stood up. Ringo was sitting with that big daft grin on his face that he has. And they walked around him and they put their finger on the top of his head and they walked around him in a circle and said, you've converted him, Father, you've converted him. You know, I said, yeah, I'll bet. So they made a big, and Ringo loved the attention. I remember that very. He was the one I liked most. So then Ringo at one point he said, could I put your hat on? I said, certainly. This black trippy stupid hat that we used to wear. So you can imagine now, he put my black trippy hat on top of the Beatles thing, you know. It looked ridiculous. And he loved it. He just put it on and he said, how do I look? And I said, it's my goal there. I said, I'm pretty terrible, but Anyway, later on I went back to the youth club and told the kids in the youth club in St Mary's and Sunderland that I had met the Beatles. First of all, they screamed and swooned and fell all over the floor, and then I told them that Ringo had worn my hat. So everybody in the youth club wanted to put my hat on. My trilby hat, my black trilby hat was never so famous ever. Everybody wanted to put the hat on that Ringo had put on. And it was George Harrison. George Harrison was a little bit sort of. I remember he was like a guy who watched you. I felt he was sizing you up, and he was kind of watching and waiting for his time to speak. And he said at one point, he says, Father, he said, I want to ask you a question. I said, yeah, please do, George. He said, you know the Pope's tiara, that thing the Pope's hat, it costs 250,000 quid. I said, thanks for telling me that, George, because I have worried so much about that. I said, I've lost sleep at night worrying about the Pope's hat. I said, I think the Pope's hat costs 250,000 quid. Yeah, amazing. He said, yeah, but what do you make of that? Like, what he's the Pope, you know? And I said, yeah, well, let me tell you something. I had just read something about it, and I said, if you're interested, George, the Pope's hat is on tour at the moment. It's on tour around the world. We call it the Pope's tiara, or whatever it is. It's like the crown jewels. And the Pope's hat is now on a tour around the world, and it's making a colossal amount of money. People are coming to see the Pope's jewellery, and not that the Pope wears it or has any interest in it at all, I said, but they're coming to see it, and it's making a ferocious amount of money. And all the money is being given to the world's poor, you know, that's it. So that's what's happening. So I'm not too worried that the Pope's hat costs 250,000. If it does, I say, I'm not worried about it at all. So, and then at one point said, I think it was Paul said, yeah, but you know, you're always talking about, you know, you talk about the poor and that, you know, you're in the pulpit, you know, talking about the poor, the church and that, and all the church's wealth. And I said, what were you talking about the poor? I said, first of all, have you ever heard me talk? I said, you know, I've been talking a long time now, I said, but I said, you haven't heard me talk, have you? I said, no, well, no. I said, how the hell do you know what I'm talking about? I said, now, I said, I can talk about your singing. I don't think it's very good, but I have heard you. So I said, you know, don't criticize what I say until you've heard me say it, you know, so let's just wait and see, you know. So anyway, they enjoyed it. There was no acrimony about it at all. They really kind of enjoyed it and laughed about it. And then, I don't know, was it John, he said something a little bit cynical, and I said, you know, John, I said, you're a nice looking guy. He said, you haven't spoken yet, but I said, he seemed to me to be a little bit cynical, and you're a very famous guy now. I said, so I wonder where that's coming from. He took his feet down off the table, I remember, and he turned his chair towards me, you know. And he said, I think it was John who said something like, yeah, but you know, all these, you're a priest and you're a Catholic priest and you drive all these cars, these smart cars and stuff like that, you know. And I said, excuse me, so I'm glad you brought that up. I said, I've been ordained 7 years. I said, whatever I was at the time, I was 32 years of age at the time. So I said, I don't have a car, I said. I walked up from my parish, it's not very far, so I walked from my parish to the theatre day. I don't have a car, I travel by bus. I don't even have a bicycle, you know. And I said, as a matter of fact, I've got a hole in my shoe. And I took my shoe off, and there was a hole right through the sole of my shoe. And I said, I held it up, and I said, see, there's a rich priest for you, okay? I'm a rich Catholic priest, you know. People are all worried about it. So, I'm trying to think, those are the essential moments in the conversation. So it came to a point where it was time for the guys to go on stage, and I said, do you have a photograph for me to, you know, I want your autographs? And they said, oh, we just have to have, we happen to have one or two, you know. And they opened a curtain on sort of some shelves, and there was like hundreds of photographs. So they grabbed a handful of photographs and they signed them, maybe about, I don't know, maybe about 15 photographs, just signed about, you know, from the Beatles, you know. I also had a long-playing record, which was, there was a girl I knew in a family I knew, she was a kid, and she just thought she died and went to heaven, and she thought I was going to meet the Beatles. So I took this long-playing record with me, and they all signed it. Every one of them signed it. Love to Jennifer from, and all they signed all their names on it. Now, she's an elderly lady now, I don't know where she lives, somewhere in Yorkshire now. I haven't seen her for many years. But I'd imagine that's a treasure of hers, with all individually signed names. So anyway, they signed about 15 photographs for me. I put them all in my pocket. And they said, would you like to come down on stage and hear us? I said, yeah, of course I would. So being the theatre chaplain, I was able to go down and stand in the wings, and of course when the curtains opened, they're screaming, kids. They were screaming for about the first 15 minutes, you know, the kids. The teenagers were just screaming and swooning all over the place. And the lads were just busy, you know, drumming and smiling. Anyway, they started, and I heard the song. So just before I was about to leave, and they were about to leave, I fished in my pocket, and I had a 10-shilling note, that famous old piece of currency that we had in England. Well, this was 1963, and I didn't have a lot of pocket money, but I did have a 10-shilling note in my pocket, and I wrote on it, and it was probably I said, to the Beatles, from one priest who doesn't care too much for money. And as they came off stage, I think it was George Harrison actually that actually handed it to. The old dash pass me had to dash because they had to escape the crowds as well. You know, they had to really get out of the theatre as safely as possible. So they dashed past me at a heck of a rate, and I just gave them the 10-shilling note and handed. I think it was George Harrison took it and said, thanks, Bob. And then, now, what they did with it, I don't know, but I do remember that a year later, in 1964, that famous song came out, I don't care too much for money, money can't buy you love. And I just thought that my little statement, here's a priest who doesn't care too much for money, may have it, I have no proof of that, whatever. Then eventually somebody wrote a book in 1964 called Love Me Do. It was about the Beatles, and it mentioned that there was a priest in Sunderland. It didn't mention my name, unfortunately. I lost my fame at that point, but it was me, obviously, and the Beatles were talking to the priest. And they mentioned that the Beatles had put several questions to me about, the wealth of the church, and it was all ribbing, it was good-natured, there was no offence given on either side. We just joking with each other. And but each time the Beatles asked me a question, according to the book, it said, the priest does not answer. And I thought, well, that's not me anyway. I don't remember not answering anybody ever, that. But anyway, 3 times it said when they asked about Stephen had a pertinent question about the church and the priest does not answer. So I was furious about the book anyway. I meant to follow it up and I didn't let it go. And I went to I went back to the youth club, and everybody just couldn't get enough of what I said. So about a week later, I was giving, I was conducting a service in the Catholic Church of St Mary's in Sunderland, and it was my turn to be on duty. And a few people had turned up for what we call adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. It's a very sacred sort of time for Catholics. And I thought, I had to say something, it's my job, so I thought, I mentioned that I had just met these phenomenal young people, and I introduced that into what I was saying about, because there's a few young people there, and I said, it's interesting that these young people were questioning me about what the church means, and was the church not interested in the poor and stuff like that, and this is, our young people are hearing this kind of thing, and so on. Anyway, I think I forget exactly what I said, but I thought it was relevant. My pastor was listening in the side chapel, and when I came up, he congratulated me. He thought this was a wonderful use of, the current affairs in the process of the sermon. A few weeks later, my bishop came to visit the parish, to do that from time to time. And the bishop took me aside and he said, I understand you met these people. And I said, what people? He said, these people, and he pretended he didn't know. But these Beatles, are they called? Is it the Beatles? I did meet them. I did meet them. My Lord, as we used to call it. I did meet them. And he said, but you spoke about them in church. I said, I did, yeah. And he said, are you serious? You mean to say you talked about these people, he didn't say people, he said, you talked about these people in church. I said, I thought it was very relevant and necessary, my Lord. And he laid into me and asked me, had I lost my reason and what on earth could I think? And I said, by the way, my pastor, my parish priest, as we called him then, my parish priest said, listen, and he congratulated me about it. And he said, I've spoken to your parish priest, and he said he didn't hear you. So I was absolutely flattened by that. I thought, well, that was the official response now to my meeting of Beatles. But anyway, the kids all loved it, and we couldn't get enough of it. I had to talk about it for weeks afterwards and remember every detail. And as I say, I had to put my hat on because Ringo Starr had worn my hat, and then a week later I went back to the theatre in my unofficial capacity as theatre chaplain to meet whoever was happened to be there, because I used to knock on dressing room doors and say, I'm a Catholic priest, you need to talk to a Catholic priest, and very frequently they did. So I met a policeman and he said, oh Father, he said I was here last week. He said, were you here? I said, I was. He says, when the Beatles were here? I said, I did, yeah. I met them. He couldn't believe it. He said, you met them? I said, yeah, I spent about 45 minutes in the dressing room and I met them. He said, oh my God, he said, my kid's not going to speak, and I've got a young daughter. She's not going to talk to me ever again. He said, because he said, Dad, you're on duty. He said, I was on crowd control. He said, you didn't get an autograph of the Beatles. So I had one signed photograph left in my pocket, and I gave it to the policeman. that was my final signature of the Beatles, that I gave it to this policeman. Well, Lise has been reconciled with his daughter now, so that good came out of it, but I thought, how stupid can you get? And I could have been a millionaire today selling that photograph. I lost an opportunity. So that's the story so far. Okay. Well, before I left, anyway, before I finally left the lads, they said, Father, it's been great talking to you, you don't get this chance very often like it, can be great, I said, yeah, it's been great for me too, it's been very interesting for me. He said, Father, if ever you're looking for money, like you might be looking for money for your church and stuff like that, we'll do something for you. We'll put on a show, we'll put on a concert for you, we'll do something for you. And at the time like this, these were new guys on the block, and I thought, yeah, it's never going to happen. So I didn't take it very seriously, but eventually, many years later, a few years ago, I was in a parish in Christ the King in Las Vegas, USA, and we were building a new church hall, which was going to cost an awful lot of money, and I remembered what the lads had said, and I wonder if, whatever it was, however many years later, 19 years later, they would remember it. So I wrote a letter to, I got the address to contact Sir Paul, and I wrote a letter reminding him of the visit. I said, I don't know if you remember this, but it was 1963, it was Sunderland Empire, 1963, September, and you did say that at that time, I said, I can't hold you to this. And I said, by the way, you owe me 10 shillings as well. I said, I'm not demanding it. I said, but you do owe me 10 shillings. But I said, you did say that you would put on a show for me, and I said, so at last, finally, we do need the money, and I wonder if you could give us some kind of donation towards our church building. So I waited for a few weeks, and finally I got a letter back from some sort of secretary person who said, thank you for your letter, Sir Paul, that was very interesting. He doesn't recollect the time that you were in Sunderland, but and we have a policy at the moment, we do not give out something like we don't give donations to churches for this, that, and the other thing. So in other words, they dropped the ball, and I don't believe that Paul ever wrote the letter. In fact, I think the secretary was just dealing with stuff that comes in all the time. I'm sure they get millions of letters and requests for money and stuff, but I think if he had ever read my letter, I think he would have been interested enough to respond to it, but who knows.